You have heard the story of Jesus' birth and death, how he came into this world through his mother, the Virgin Mary. You have heard or read how he died and was resurrected. But have you ever stopped to ponder what happened to the people who killed him? Remember, there was a high priest who demanded his execution. Yes, there was a governor who gave his assent by signing the order. And what about the soldiers who humiliated him, dehumanized him, and nailed him to the cross? The stories didn't just end there. Did these people move on with their lives, or did something follow them? History doesn't forget men like that. And neither did fate, because some of their ends were worse than the crucifixion itself. Their stories didn't end there, and some of their endings were terrifying and horrifying. Trust me, karma is real. If this has already got you thinking, hit the like button now, because what happened to the rest of them is even wilder. The crucifixion of Jesus wasn't just a tragic death. The crucifixion of Jesus was one of the most brutal and bizarre executions in human history. It was a public execution, driven by politics, religion, fear, and pride. But it wasn't just a spiritual moment, it was political, strategic and intentional. Behind the scenes, powerful men pulled the strings. Behind the nails and the crown of thorns were men, powerful men. Men with titles, robes, and armies at their command. Some feared Jesus. Others hated him. A few simply wanted to keep the peace, no matter the cost. The high priest who felt threatened by Jesus' knowledge, authority, and influence. The Roman governor who wanted to keep the peace and gratify the people. The puppet king who mocked him. The soldiers who carried out the orders. These weren't just characters in a Bible story or villains from a storybook. They were real people, high priests, governors, kings, and soldiers. People with names, with power, and they each had a choice. But each of them played a role in sending Jesus to the cross. Some tried to silence him, others walked away thinking the job was done. But as you're about to see, the story didn't end at the cross. But here's the question history rarely asks. What happened to them afterward? Did they sleep at night? Did they repent, or were they condemned? Did they rise in power, or fall in shame and disgrace? Did guilt eat away at them? Or did judgment catch up with them in this life? Some of their endings are well documented. Others are lost in legend, strange accounts whispered through time. But almost none of them ended well. In this video, we find out the fate of the very men who had a hand in the death of Jesus. And how, in the end, it wasn't just Jesus on trial, it was them. This is what happened to the men who killed Jesus. Number 1. Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor of Judea at the time of Jesus' crucifixion. He was well known among the people, and his name echoed through time. This man had a choice. And not only that, he had the legitimate and legal power to free or kill him. And yet, when the moment came, he chose politics over truth. Pilate was a leader, and not an ordinary leader at that. He was a career politician. Rome appointed Pontius Pilate. His job was to maintain peace in Judea, a region that was constantly on the edge of revolt. The Jewish leaders didn't like him, and he didn't like them either. But he needed their cooperation to avoid chaos and problems. So when they brought Jesus to him and demanded his execution, Pilate was trapped. He felt cornered or trapped in a box. He interrogated Jesus but found no fault in him and even tried to release him. But yet, the crowd, stirred up by the priests, shouted louder, "Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him!" And Pilate, being afraid of another riot by the wild crowd, gave in. He washed his hands in front of the crowd. Washing his hands doesn't mean that his hands were dirty and he was trying to sanitize them. No, that is far from it. Actually, that gesture was a symbolic way of saying, "This isn't on me." But can I shock you with the gospel truth? It was. The death of Jesus was on Pontius Pilate. He had a fair share in Jesus' crucifixion. According to early Christian writers, Pilate's life unraveled after that moment. Within just a few years, he was shamefully removed from power by Rome. He was accused of cruelty and excessive violence. Some accounts say he was exiled, while others say he committed suicide after falling out of favor with Emperor Caligula. One tradition even claims he ran mad, as he was haunted by visions of the man he couldn't save. Pilate tried to play diplomatic politics by staying neutral. However, history doesn't forget. In eternity, his name is forever tied to a blood-stained verdict. A lot has been said about Pilate. Well, Pontius Pilate wasn't the only one who wanted Jesus gone right. He may have had a hand in Jesus' crucifixion, but he wasn't the real engine behind it. The people who engineered Jesus' crucifixion were men who wore robes, knew the law, and were seen as godly and righteous men. That brings us to the second man on the list. Number 2, Caiaphas. If there was one man truly behind the crucifixion, it was Caiaphas, the Jewish high priest. The man who stood at the center of the temple, preaching and interpreting the law of Moses, yet feared the truth more than blasphemy. Caiaphas wasn't just a priest, he was a manipulator and a political operator. He held the position of a high priest for nearly 2 decades, which is quite longer than the tenure of most high priests. Why is this so then? You see, the reason is this: Caiaphas was a smart man. He knew how to keep both Rome and the Jewish elite happy. But Jesus? The moment he saw Jesus in the picture, he felt threatened. Jesus threatened everything Caiaphas stood for. Jesus flipped tables in the temple, called out the hypocrisy of Pharisees and religious leaders, and drew massive crowds. Caiaphas saw it all and knew that if this man isn't stopped, they'll all lose control. So he hatched a plan. He gathered the council. He held a midnight trial that broke nearly every Jewish legal rule. And when Jesus remained silent, Caiaphas tore his robes and accused him of blasphemy. But make no mistake about it, this wasn't about theology. It was far from it. It was a political move. It was about power. After Jesus was crucified, the Bible doesn't say what happened to Caiaphas directly, but history picks up the trail. Roman records show Caiaphas was removed from office not long after Pilate was fired. Perhaps, he may have been fired by the same governor who removed Pilate from power. This was how a renowned and highest feared and respected high priest was removed from his position. He left in shame and sorrow. No glory, no legacy. Some ancient traditions say he died in disgrace, as his name was cursed by the very people he tried to please. Others say his tomb was found centuries later, with bones marked by shame. Although Caiaphas tried to silence a movement, instead, he made it explode. That's because Christianity spread after Jesus died. And while Caiaphas plotted behind closed doors, there was yet again another man who mocked Jesus to his face. A man who felt untouchable. A man intoxicated by the power of royalty. He might have worn a crown, but inwardly, he was hiding a weak heart. Number 3. Herod Antipas. Like many princes in royal families, Herod Antipas was born into power. He was the son of Herod the Great. In case you didn't know, his father, Herod the Great, was the same king who once tried to kill baby Jesus. Antipas inherited a great portion of his father's kingdom and ruled over Galilee and Perea. And so, when Jesus was brought before him during his trial, Herod had one thing in mind: entertainment. Jesus had become famous. He had drawn multitudes of people from different places to himself and was doing all sorts of wonders. Herod had heard these miraculous stories firsthand. He had how water turned to wine, blind eyes opened, the dead raised to life. And now, the same Jesus who did all those miraculous works was standing right in front of him. But Herod didn't inquire from him to know the truth, nor did he try to save Jesus. Instead, he turned the situation into a miracle show and entertainment galore by mocking Jesus. Antipas dressed Jesus in a royal robe. Maybe he expected Jesus to react. And when Jesus said nothing, Herod sent him back to Pilate with a smirk. That was Herod's chance. That was his opportunity to write his name in the good pages of history. That moment was the time to forego politics and stand for truth. It was time to recognize Jesus as the promised king. What did he do with the chance given to him to save Jesus from death and condemnation? He had a choice, like other men who had a hand in the death of Jesus. He could have used that avenue to announce to the world that Jesus is indeed the Son of God. But instead, he played the fool. History tells us Herod's story didn't end in laughter. Within a few years, he was accused of treason by his own nephew and stripped of his title by Emperor Caligula. Therefore, he and his wife, Herodias, were exiled to Gaul, which is located in modern-day France. Herod Antipas, a king who ruled a great kingdom, was now turned into a nobody. And according to some accounts, Herod died in obscurity. Sick. Powerless. Forgotten. The man who once wore a crown, died without a kingdom, without honor, and without the last word. But while kings and priests played politics, there was one man who got closer to the cross than anyone else. It was a soldier who held the hammer in his hand. Number 4. The Roman centurion. This man was unlike the others who had been mentioned. He wasn't a priest. He wasn't a politician. He was a soldier, a Roman centurion, hardened by war, and trained to kill without blinking. And on that day, he was given one job: to oversee and ensure the crucifixion of Jesus. We don't know his name for sure. Some traditions later call him Longinus, but in the Bible, he's simply the centurion. He was there and witnessed the whole scene for himself. He watched it all. He saw the beatings, the mocking. He saw the nails driven through Jesus' hands and feet. He saw how the cross was lifted up and erected on the ground. And unlike the others, he wasn't emotionally involved. To him, it was just another execution. Another random day of military work. But then something happened. He heard Jesus pray for his killers. He heard the words, "Father, forgive them." He watched Jesus show kindness to a thief. He felt the sky go dark. He saw the earth shake when Jesus breathed his last breath. And then, the centurion stood at the foot of the cross and said the words no one expected. Truly, this was the Son of God. That single moment changed his life. According to early church tradition, that centurion later became a believer. Some accounts say he left the army and joined the ministry. According to these accounts, they say he preached the gospel and was eventually martyred for his faith. From executioner to follower. From the man who raised the hammer to the man who laid his own life down for the very one he once crucified. And then to crown it all, there was one final man. The betrayer. The one who set it all in motion. And couldn't live with the weight of what he'd done. Number 5. Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot was one of the disciples of Jesus. His story is so common and well known that unbelievers and non-Christians know him to be a traitor. Judas wasn't like Pilate or Caiaphas or the Roman centurion. He didn't drive in the nails. He didn't shout, "Crucify him." But none of it would have happened, at least not like that, without Judas Iscariot. He was one of the 12. He walked with Jesus, shared meals with him, saw the miracles. He heard the teachings of Jesus and heard every parable he shared. And still, he sold his master for 30 pieces of silver. Maybe Judas, seeing how powerful and anointed Jesus was, thought Jesus would save himself. Maybe he thought he could profit and still walk away clean. But when Jesus was arrested and sentenced, the reality hit him hard like a giant stone. Feeling remorseful and overwhelmed with guilt, Judas ran back to the temple. He threw the silver coins at the priest's feet and cried, "I have sinned. I have betrayed innocent blood." But the damage was done already, and there was no remedy to it. Jesus was already headed to the cross. And Judas was headed toward something darker. He couldn't live with what he'd done. The Gospel of Matthew says he went out and hanged himself in a field. But shockingly, the book of Acts gives even more grim details. The book of Acts records that the body of Judas Iscariot fell, burst open, and the field where he died was later called the Field of Blood. Judas knew he had made a grave mistake. He wanted to undo it. But some choices come with no rewind button. In the end, the man who betrayed Jesus wasn't killed by a Roman sword or a Jewish stone. He was destroyed by the weight of his own decision. But here's where it gets eerie. Within just a few decades of Jesus' death, nearly everyone involved in his execution was either dead, disgraced, or forgotten by history. Within just 40 years of Jesus' crucifixion, everything changed. The Jewish temple was gone. Jerusalem was burned to the ground by the Romans. The Levitical priesthood was scattered. Rome itself was thrown into political chaos. You see, nearly every man who touched Jesus' life and caused his death, from Judas Iscariot to Caiaphas to Pontius Pilate, either fell, disappeared, or died in disgrace. Was that a coincidence? Maybe. But it is clearly not. The Bible says that God cannot be mocked, and whatsoever a man sows, the same shall he reap also. Or maybe, you just don't lay hands on the Son of God without consequences. This video teaches us to be mindful of our actions. Be careful of what you say or do about people, especially when they are innocent. These men thought they were ending a movement. They thought there was terminating the life and ministry of a man who claimed to be the Son of God. They felt there was killing a man like every other prisoner or criminal awaiting execution. He thought they were silencing a voice, killing a man. Because while they faded into history, or infamy, the man they tried to erase became the most followed and worshipped figure in human history. No matter what happens, the truth cannot be killed. It may be silenced for a while, but after that, it will see the light of the day. You can kill a messenger, but you can't kill his message. You can bury a body, but you can't stop a resurrection. I hope you enjoyed this video. If this changed how you see the crucifixion story, there's more for you right here on this channel. Tap the next video showing on your screen to find out how the 12 disciples of Jesus died. That's an interesting video to watch. Some of them died in ways you can't imagine. Subscribe for more untold stories, shocking tales that will blow your mind. I'll see you in the next one.